Welcome to my channel. Today we are going to be making the Tuesday tote. This is a pattern by Knotted Threads Co. And I just recently took a class at the expo in Washington to make this tote, and I am absolutely obsessed with it. So without further ado, let's get started. Here are a few examples of what I have made in the Tuesday tote pattern. This one has pockets on either side there. So that's the first one I've made. So this is actually vinyl. This is actually quilted cotton. And on the inside is waterproof canvas. This one also has a slip pocket down in there with a magnetic cloth. And this fabric I actually got when I was at the expo. And this came from More Me Know. Again, has a slip pocket on the inside, has a little holder for your keys, magnetic closure. And this one's got a dual magnetic closure, waterproof canvas on the inside. And then it's got a little holder for your keys. This one actually is with the weekend add-on pack. And that one gives you instruction on how to do the exterior slip pocket. So definitely recommend getting that add-on. It gives a whole lot of options for add-on options for the Tuesday tote. All right, so we're gonna get started. We are going to be making option number B, which is the option that gives you the two colors like this, one color on the top, one color on the bottom. So that is option number B. That is the option we're going to be making today. So this is going to be the liner, and as you can see, this is waterproof canvas, and I have cut them to the dimensions that the pattern calls for, and I have cut out the corners for doing our box corners in a little while. You need 2 of those, so I have those cut. And then I have the slip pocket for the inside. I'm gonna walk you through how to make that, but you need 2 of those cut to the dimensions called for in the pattern. And then this is going to be our outside pattern for the bag, and then this will be the bottom portion here. So we have our top panel cut to the pattern's dimensions, and then the bottom, again with these boxed out corners. We have 2 of those, one for each side. And then on the back, so I am doing just a cotton fabric. So the pattern calls for, you can really be versatile with this. To keep it domestic friendly, we're gonna stick to a cotton, and then the vinyl that I have over here is a lightweight. The waterproof canvas adds a little bit of bulk, so I don't feel like I need to interface it anymore, but you could interface more if you felt like you needed to give it a little bit more structure. But I used Decoville Light on the back of this, cut to the just shy of the dimension of the pieces here, and I'm not going to do an interfacing on my waterproof canvas because it's a pretty heavy waterproof canvas. All right, so we're gonna get started. We're gonna work on the exterior of the bag first. So I am going to set my first one aside and one of my vinyl aside. So I wanted this to be my upper and this to be the lower. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna line this up, and this is what would be the top edge to the bottom edge. The right sides together. I'm going to put these together. I'm going to clip these in place, and then I'm going to sew along the edge here using the seam allowance called for in the pattern. Okay, so we sewed across there. And then what we're gonna do is we are going to fold this down. Now you have some decisions to make here because you can do this either way. I feel like either way is correct. So you can either have your seam going this way, which is what I'm gonna do, and then I'm gonna top stitch along my vinyl piece, or you can have your seam going the other way and then you top stitch along your woven side. So you sort of have to choose at this point which way you want to go. I'm going to do the bottom portion. And I like to top stitch at about 1/8 of an inch. Be sure you back stitch. And take your time, always take your time. Going across here. You could press this if you felt like you needed to. You just have to be real careful with the vinyl at this point that you wouldn't scorch it. So what I like to do is just to kind of pull these apart here, and then I'm just eyeballing down to make sure that it looks like it's nice and pressed out. You can finger press this, you can get a roller and kind of press that down if you want to. Remember to back stitch at the end. And there you have it. Your top stitch along there. Nice and neat looking. And then next we're gonna do, we have our other side, so we're gonna do that real quick. Next we're gonna work on the interior pocket. And in order to do that, I'm gonna do mine a little bit different than they do it in the tutorial, and I'll kind of walk you through how and why I'm doing things a little bit differently. So cut your pieces per the instructions in the pattern. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna put them right sides together. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna leave the bottom side of my pocket open just a little bit so that I can get it turned inside out, or turned right side out, once I've sewn around the whole edge. So here we go. Okay, so what I've done is I've gone around and I have clipped this together so it'll stay together. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start on this what is the bottom edge, and I'm gonna leave about 1/3 of it open. Go along here, sew all around the outside, and then I'm gonna stop over here about 1/3 of the way down so that I have the center section still open so I can turn it inside out. Okay, so be sure you're taking your time. I usually start on these far corners first, and I kind of get my finger in there. It seems to kind of help from the inside. And then I use my thumb and just then it kind of pokes it right out. Okay, so now I have this all turned right side out, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna if you use your fingers, you can just kind of work these seams back and forth to kind of work the seam out up to the edge. See, just like that. So now it's nice and straight. So you do that all the way around. If you finger press it, it sort of helps, but prior to going over to your iron. So I'm going to do that all the way around. And then down here on the bottom, this is the part that's still open. And so what I do is I just kind of pull it straight. See how it just kind of naturally turns in on itself? And then I just kind of line it up, get it looking nice. And then I'm going to kind of finger press this down. And then I'm going to go over to my iron, and I'm going to be careful because the back of mine is lined with like the PVC plastic stuff. So I'm going to be real careful, but I'm going to go over to my iron. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my iron, and if you have a small iron, that works best. I have the Tula Pink, this iron here. It works great for this kind of stuff, and it has this nice little point on it, which gets right into those corners. And what I do is I just go around. You only want to hold for a few seconds because remember what I said, this is waterproof canvas, so you have to be careful. I'm going to go all the way around the edges, checking them as I go. And I'm just holding for a few seconds. Like I said, dry heat, no steam. I'm going around. Now here's the side that I haven't sewn up yet. So I'm just making extra sure that that looks nice and straight. I'm going to iron that as well. There we go. And then just this last side, again, making sure everything looks nice and straight. I'm going to iron that down. Okay, so now that I've done that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my machine. I'm going to get my lining, and I'm going to line this up on my lining. And in the instructions, she tells you where and how to do that. I have a little piece sticking out right here. A little trick is you can take a lighter, you can just burn that little edge right there. There's just a little string sticking off of the waterproof canvas, and I'll just make it go right away. Okay, so I am going to have my opening facing down. You can kind of, you know, some people prefer to do it this way, some prefer to do it down. I prefer to do it down. So I'm going to go to my machine. I'm going to sew across this top edge because this is going to be open, right? Because this is the top of our pocket. And then I'm going to get it lined up on my backing, and then I'm going to sew around the edge, and I'll walk you through that. Okay, so like I said, I'm gonna sew across the top of this thing where the top of the pocket's gonna be, because that's gonna be exposed. And I'm gonna sew this. I'm gonna do a 1/8 seam allowance here. And some people say to pull the threads to the back and tie them. I like to just backstitch here. I feel like it doesn't look unsightly. I feel like it's just for the best to do a backstitch right there. And I'm gonna run across the top, keeping things nice and straight. And just be real careful when you come to your corner here. And again, once I get close, I'm gonna just slow it way down, get all the way to the end, and I'm gonna backstitch there, and then I'm gonna cut my thread. So there you have it. We have our nice straight pocket. This is gonna be the top that's open, so you can utilize that pocket in the interior of the bag. Okay, so I have my pocket on my back, on my interior lining now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around, and I'm going to start over here, and I'm going to go down, and I'm going to go across, and then I'm going to come up. Now remember, down here is still open. So I'm going to hold that down really, really well, so as I sew across it, it stays nice and straight. And I don't know if you guys have used these yet, but these are what's called sew tights, and they're amazing. So they have a magnet on the back and then a magnet on this side. And what they do is they just hold everything together. Because when you're using things like waterproof canvas and some other stuff besides cotton, once you poke a sewing pen through them, it's really hard to come back from that. And then otherwise you would have things all wadded up on this side if you were using clips. So these sew tights are a lifesaver. Highly, highly recommend them. I picked them up at the Sewing Expo in Puyallup just recently, and wow, I mean, color me impressed. I love them. So we're gonna go around the machine. Like I said, we're gonna do a 1/8 seam allowance, and I'll see you when we're finished. Okay, so I have this lined up, and again, I backstitch when I start and when I finish. I just feel like it doesn't look terrible, but it's just a good way to secure the bag. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. Just make sure you leave yourself a nice long tail so you can pull it to the back, and then you can tie it, and then you can singe it with your lighter. Totally up to you. Now take your time, hold things in place, going along here, nice and straight. The good news is that this is, you know, on the inside of the bag. So if you're new to bag making and you're feeling nervous, don't feel nervous. You're going to be okay. I go all the way to the edge there. Like I said, I'm doing a 1/8. And now, and like I said before, my needle stops in the down position. If your needle doesn't do that on your machine, be sure you leave it in the down position as you pivot your piece around. So I have this little tail here, but since I did backstitch, I'm just going to snip it off so it's out of my way. Now, again, down here is the portion that I don't have sewed closed yet. So I'm going to hold everything in place here as I go. I'm just going to go nice and slow through here, making sure everything is nice and flat, nice and straight. You're not in a rush, and then you're just going to sew across. So I'm going to move these out of the way because I'm getting to the portion where it's going to kind of be in the way, but it should pretty much hold itself in place now. And I do have this one here. So I'm going to go all the way to the end now. Then watching that corner, stay crisp in the corner. Go one more, and then I'm going to pivot it. Okay, now I'm double checking that everything is nice and flat. And then I'm going to run up this side. And I love this walking foot option on my TL18. I also have the foot that is like the non-stick foot here. This also works really well. If you have a walking foot for your machine, great. If you don't, then definitely get one of those non-stick. It works really great with this waterproof canvas. Okay, I'm going all the way up to the top. I'm back stitching twice. That's the same as what I did over here, so it'll be nice and matching. And then I'm all done. Okay, I'm gonna take this off. And here's how it turned out. So I don't feel like this is unsightly. Some people don't love that. I don't feel like it's a big deal. Another thing you can do, and I think I'm gonna actually do that here, is you can put a little rivet right up in the corner. And again, make sure you don't cut your threads. You don't want to do that because it'll start to come unraveled down here. But avoid that. Get right up in the corner and put just a little tiny rivet in there, and that will hold this pocket nicely. And so here it is. We remember we sewed across here first, and then we just went around these three sides, and then down here on the bottom is the portion that I hadn't sewn closed yet, and going across the edge here holds that down really nicely, and it turns out really looks really great there. So, all right, let's add this little rivet next. Okay, so next we're gonna punch a little hole for the rivet. Now I have a really nice rivet machine, or a rivet press from Tandy Leather. If you're going to be doing a bunch of rivets, highly, highly, highly recommend it. It works really great. It helps keep those rivets nice and even and straight. In this case, I'm just putting in 2 little rivets, and I just want to show you an option that if you don't have the expensive tools, you can still do this. I'm just going to use this little cheap punch that I got. I believe I got this from Michael's. And then I have this little guy here, and I picked this up from Hobby Lobby, and it's just been trashed over the years from utilizing it. But I put that under my piece on my table surface, and you want to make sure you have a nice solid table surface. And then I just make sure that where I'm going to punch the hole is over top of the little plastic piece here. Now, if you feel uncomfortable, you can totally measure this. You can measure in, a certain distance and a certain distance and put a little circle. I'm just going to eyeball this. This is an interior pocket. You're really not going to see it very much. If you're worried, if you're new, if you are stressed about it, totally measure it out. You'll be fine. But in my case, I'm just going to eyeball it and get those rivets in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, and again, you don't want to get it on your 2 sewing lines that you did here, because then you're going to cut those threads. So just on the inside of that, in the kind of little corner, you can kind of see where I'm at there. I'm going to go right there. And then I have this mallet. This is something I just picked up from Tandy Leather, and it's weighted. It's a great little hammer. Highly recommend it. Okay, once I get that lined up where I want, I'm just gonna hit, and then it just goes right down into that piece of plastic down there. And then I just kind of wiggle it back and forth so you're sure that you got all the way through all the layers, and then pull it up. And then there is your little hole. And you're gonna flip it around. You're going to do the same distance from the corner over here. And again, if you feel like you need to measure it, measure it. If you don't feel comfortable, you can totally go that route. Totally up to you. I'm just going to go here, punch it in, like I said, wiggle it back and forth. Boom. This setup is probably under $10. You can totally use this setup if you don't want to invest. Like I said, I do have a really nice rivet press from Tandy, but I'm just putting in 2 rivets. They're on the interior of the bag, and I'm just not super concerned about aesthetics for them. Okay, so I have this huge pack of rivets. I have learned the hard way over and over and over and over again that if your post is long, and it's too long, and you have it sticking way out from your fabric, which this is not very thick when you really start talking about rivets, it is going to, when you start to hammer down, it's going to kind of turn different angles. It's going to angle itself. It's going to deform. It's just not going to look nice. So it's important that when you're picking your rivet post, that you pick one that is nice and short for this waterproof canvas. So in this case, these are the tiniest little rivets that I have. And see how small that little guy is? So I'm going to put those in. And I need to get one with a post, and then one cap, And always look at your caps and your posts to make sure that they're the same color and they're the same size, especially in these variety packs. Okay, so you're going to stick your rivet through just like that. And then on the back side, see how it doesn't stick too far out? Let me see if I can get there you go. Okay, so I'm going to put my cap on it. Now, if your rivet sticks way out in the back and you don't have any other rivets, don't run to the store. Don't panic. What you can do is you can take a piece of vinyl that you cut out your corners with even. Just have like a little scrap piece like this. You can just fold it in half or fold it in quarters and then punch right through that hole. Put that on the back of your piece, put it on the back half, put it there, and then run your rivet through that. That'll give it that thickness, that bulk that it needs, so that you don't have a big post sticking out of the back of your bag. And that's kind of a way to kind of cheat the system a little bit and be able to use what you have and not have to run to the store and get something else. Okay, so the other thing that will come usually with most of the sets is this little cupped little guy here. So what you're going to do is you're going to put that behind. And, oh, my little mat back. Oh, I just dropped my hammer and bumped my camera. Let me grab that real quick. Sorry about that. Okay, so you're going to set that down on your piece. You're going to put this rounded part of the rivet down here on your piece. Okay. And then with your kit, there should be the top half. See how it's kind of cupped there? That's the portion you're going to put down on your rivet. Now you'll be able to kind of feel that, like, is your rivet at a straight up and downing, or do you have it at an angle? And you'll kind of be able to tell when you kind of set all that up. Again, you want a solid surface table while you're doing this, so you don't have a lot of flex and movement. Okay, so once you have that at a nice straight angle, hold on to it, and then you're just going to whack, 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 whack. Okay, and then stop there. And then look at your cap, make sure that it's nice and tight. It's not moving around. It's nice and firm, and that rivet is nice and set in place. Okay, and we're going to do the other side. I'm going to get myself a cap and a post here. Now, some people like to do things differently. Some people like to bring the post up from the back. Some people like to put the post down from the front. I mean, I'm not putting it on a decorative cap, so I just do it this way. I don't know why. I don't really have a rhyme or reason to why I do it the way that I do it this way, but they're double, you know, they're both the same. It's a double-sided rivet. So either side can be up and you're totally fine. So again, you're going to line this up in your cupped little holder here. You're going to take your cupped side down, a nice straight up and down, and then a firm whack. 1, 2, 3. And if you're holding onto this, you're going to kind of feel it go down with each time you hit. And again, I'm going to look at that rivet, make sure everything is set. It's nice and it's firm in there. I can't pull it apart. And there you have it. You're good to go. So I have my 2 rivets here now. Easy peasy, under $10 to have a full setup. Nice and even over here. I didn't cut any of my stitches. And that's going to give it just a little bit more stability when you start using this, so that you don't tear it, you don't start pulling it, it doesn't get deformed, all of that. It's just going to help hold that pocket nice and tight. Okay, so now I'm back to my 2 exterior pieces. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them right sides together, just like this. And what we're going to do is we are going to sew along just this bottom edge to start. Just this bottom edge, you're going to pin it in place. So across the whole thing at the seam allowance called for in the pattern, and then meet me back here. Back stitching to the beginning and the end of every row here. So now, there you have it. Now what we're gonna do, we're gonna open this up. See how pretty that looks? And I just gently pull on it here. And then I'm gonna flip it over, and I've kind of pulled it apart here. Now you have to be gentle. I mean, you can tear this stuff, so be careful. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this seam right here, and I'm just gonna push it down just like that. And then I'm gonna finger press all the way out, trying to lay this down nice and flat. Now this is vinyl, so you could iron it, but you just have to be real careful because you could scorch it real easy and melt it, okay? So I'm gonna finger press it down just like that. Now one thing you could do if you don't feel comfortable, you could put double-sided tape on this if you wanted to. I'm gonna go to my machine and I'm gonna flip it over, and I'm just gonna use my fingers to kind of hold it down from underneath the piece, and I'll show you how I do that. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna top stitch on either side of this seam from the top side to hold this down. And what's gonna happen is it's gonna make this bag sit really, really nice. When it's all finished, it'll just look nice and crisp on the bottom, and it'll sit on a nice flat surface and not kind of be wobbly and flop around. Okay, so I'm gonna flip this over, and I'm gonna kind of roll this portion up of my piece out of the way. I'm gonna look at it from this side. Now see how my finger pressing has it kind of held in place. I'm gonna go to my machine. I'm gonna put it down here. I'm doing a 1/8 inch top stitch, and I think that's pretty average for that seam, for these seams is 1/8. Back stitch, always back stitch, and then I'm going to run along this seam, all the way along the seam, and from the bottom I'm going to pay attention and make sure that this seam is staying nice and flat and open, and I'm just going to sew across the length of this seam, keeping this tucked in and out of its way. Now take this nice and slow. You're not in a hurry. Stop periodically, make sure that this little seam is staying separated out, and then just go all the way across. Okay, once we get to the very end, I'm gonna go as close as I can to the edge, and I am really, really close to the edge. Again, my needle is down. I'm gonna lift up my presser foot. I'm gonna turn my whole piece, and I know that if I run for about 2 stitches, that's going to get me almost exactly 1/8 of an inch on this side of the seam. So I'm going to go 1, and then I'm going to go 2, and then I'm going to stop again, needle down. I'm going to turn, I'm going to put this down, and in looking at this I can see that I'm at almost exactly 1/8 of an inch. Now feeling from the bottom, I can feel that this seam is still nice and open. I'm going to run back across the length of this piece. Going nice and slow, double checking that that seam is still nice and open from the underside, and all the way across here. When I get to the very end, I'm going to back stitch, just like I did when I started. 1, 2, and then I go back a couple, and then I'm done. Okay, so now there you have it. We went across both sides of that seam, and now from the back you can see that holds that seam down nice and flat. It looks really nice from both sides, and you don't really notice, you know, the real benefit of doing this until the very end when you're really putting the bag together. But I promise this step is absolutely worth your time to do. Okay, so now it's time to put the straps on. I've cut these to the length that the pattern calls for, and now I want to singe these edges so that they don't fray as I'm getting them put on the bag. I like to go and melt both sides. Here we go. And if you can hear my dog barking in the background, I apologize. My daughter's just getting home from basketball practice, and I can hear our dogs barking. Okay. All right. So there you have it. Both of our halves are nice and even. Okay. So off camera, I measured from the end of my piece over what the pattern calls for, and I have 2 white marks here. Now what I'm going to do is we're going to take these pieces, and you want to make sure that you don't have any, like, you know, twists or turns in them, right? So make sure that they're nice and straight. We're going to line them up here. And the pattern, they say you should have half of an inch hanging over. So my line is here. I'm putting the bag strap on this side of that white line on both sides. And I want to measure out 1/2. This just helps with stability. And then I'm going to pin it in place. Double checking one more time because I just moved it. Okay, 1/2. And same on this side. White line is here. I'm going to put my strap on this side of it. Okay. And then I'm going to measure out 1/2 of an inch. And then I'm going to pin it. And what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the machine. I'm going to double check all my measurements before I sew anything. We're going to go over to the machine and we're going to baste it in place so that it doesn't move around on us. Oh, see, just like that. I just messed that up. Okay. Let's do that again. Again, on this side of the line, 1/2 of an inch. I'm going to hold this in place. I'm going to baste this at 1/8 of an inch in so that I don't worry about it getting in the middle of my seam allowance later. And what I do is I run across and I back stitch and I go back, and then I run across one more time. And then cut. And then I'm going to go over to this one. I'm going to make sure that everything looks nice and straight. I'm going to double check that I'm at 1/2 of an inch. It moved just a smidge. There we go. I'm going to get it underneath the machine here, and at 1/8 of an inch, I'm going to sew across and then back stitch and then back across. Okay, so now I have both of those basted in place. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do, I have these basted in place, but what I like to do is I like to line up my fabrics edges here, and I just want to make sure that these two straps line up, because if you happen to miss measure or something, then you may have a strap that's off and it'll just look funny in the end. So I'm just making sure that those line up, and they do. This is just kind of folding down a little bit because it is a cotton fabric. So, but those both line up really well, and I'm happy with that. So we're good to move on to the next step. Okay, so the next step on our exterior, I'm going to show you on this side. What we're going to do is we are going to line these up and we're going to sew along here. Now what's going to be really important is to be sure that these seams match up perfectly right here. And then you're going to pin them in place. This part is super important. If you have a pattern here that needs to line up, that's important too. But I've just found that if your vinyl doesn't line up, your whole bag just does not look aesthetic. So I've got it pinned over here. I'm going to run along here first, and then I'm going to pin the other side. We're going to run along here, and then I'm going to show you how to box those corners. Now, as I get right up to this seam here, I'm going to double check that everything looks like it's lined up, and it is, before I go across the seam. Now, one thing I kind of like to do here is I do back stitch right here, just because that piece is just a little bit thicker right there. And I'm going to finish up running along the edge here. Now remember, as you get up here to the top and you get to the end, just make sure this is all nice and lined up here. Remember to back stitch. Just like that. Okay. All right, so now we've got this seam done, and we're going to do this other side. I'm going to make sure that this here lines up perfectly. I'm going to clip it immediately, and I like to clip it on this side of it so it can't move. And then I'm going to put one here, and then I'm always making sure things are lined up here. It's always good to double, triple, quadruple check everything each time to make sure things are lined up before you stitch them in place. Okay, And starting here, down, back stitch, and we're going to sew along here. Now I'm getting close to the seam, making sure that that's nice and lined up, back stitching, and then down and over it, and then continue along. Back stitch here, thread cut, and done. Beautiful. Great job. Okay, you guys won't be able to see it, but I did look down there to make sure that my vinyl lines up, and it does. So next we're gonna box these corners. So what we're gonna do is you're gonna pull these corners out just like this, just like that. You're gonna line up your seam here and here. And what I do is I open this seam up. What it does is it keeps that little intersection there nice and light so you don't get too much bulk. Always pin or clip, I should say, clip right there. And then what you're gonna do is you're just gonna make sure this is spread out nice and tight. And then what I do is I feel along here and I feel along back here just to make sure those seams are lined up. As long as they're lined up in here, then you're gonna get a nice, square, beautiful seam there. This is gonna be hard to see, so my apologies in advance. You're gonna sew along here, again, using the seam allowance called for in the pattern. Back stitch, always back stitch. I remove the pin right before I go over that seam. Back stitch at the end. And there you have it. See how nice and flat that is? Now you can go along and cut this if you want to. You can cut it with your pinking shears. You can cut it with just a regular scissor. Don't cut those threads. Remember, you guys, don't cut those threads. But get as close as you can. That just helps reduce the bulk. This vinyl's a little bit thick for pinking shears, but okay. So there we have it. I'm going to repeat that on the other side over here. Pull this out, and your strap shouldn't reach to that seam, but just be sure you're not letting it get into it just in case. I'm matching up my seams here. I'm flattening this out just like that. Now I'm gonna pin it right over top of that seam just like that. See that? And then it's nice and square. Again, same seam allowance as before. Make sure you're not getting anything underneath of the bag that's going to get stitched in there. Don't get this other corner in there. Kind of mush this down and around. Everything's pretty pliable. If you start feeling like you're struggling here, put on a couple more pins. It's never going to hurt, or clips. It's never going to hurt to put on some extra clips, right? So you can keep that nice and straight. And it's going to be hard for you guys to see this again, and I'm sorry for that. I'm going to take off this first one, needle down, back stitch, and then forward. And then I'm going to make sure that that stays nice and flat all the way across. And get to the end, I'm back stitching again, and cut. Pinking shears to get rid of that bulk, or just regular scissors if you don't have pinking shears. Don't go buy extra things, it's not necessary. Sometimes it's nice to have, especially for like quilt cotton, but these are not by any means required if you're just getting started. Be real careful you don't cut your thread there. I got real close, so don't do that. But I missed it, but not by much, so just be real careful. And then if you have any of these little threads here, you're not going to see them, but if they bother you, you can cut them off. You can use your lighter to kind of singe those little threads to get rid of them. Okay, so this portion of the bag is done. I'm going to tuck my little straps in to here. This is what it, let's see if I can get a good, sorry guys, I'm bumping you around. This is what the inside's looking like right now. I have my corners boxed. My seams are all sewn, and I am good to go on this one. Now we're gonna go back to our interior. So I'm gonna set this aside. And here's our interior. Here's the piece that we sewed the pocket on. Here's our blank piece. Now, if you're using the add-on pack, this is where you're gonna add your zipper pockets, or you're gonna add, you know, if you did if you're gonna do the top that has the vinyl, there's a way to make a drawstring bag. There's a way to add like a little key fob clip. I think there's like a center pocket. There's a zipper closure. There's all kinds of stuff in her add-on pack. So if you're looking to go something just, you know, not so basic, I guess is the term, that add-on pack is the way to go. If you're looking for just a basic sort of market tote, this pattern is excellent just the way it is too. So I am just doing the slip pocket, and then I'm going to leave this side blank. Sometimes I do a slip pocket on both sides. Sometimes I don't. If I have some extra fabric, I'm like, oh, why not? Let's make an extra pocket. In this case, I don't have the extra fabric, so I'm just going to do the one slip pocket. And then I'm going to get these sewn together, and we're going to get this bag finished up. So right sides together, and I'm going to line all of this up. I'm going to pin it all in place. We're going to sew this up per the seam allowance called for in the pattern. We're going to sew all the way down both of the sides, and on the very end, or on the very bottom, we're not going to sew it completely because we're going to birth, we're going to have to birth the bag. So what we're going to do is I'm going to leave about just over a third at the very bottom open, and I'll show you all of that. And then we're going to get the two bags sewn together. All right, we're gonna get started. I have this all clipped in place, so I'm gonna get this lined up. Now, one thing to remember if you're doing waterproof canvas, this portion of it is kind of slick. And if you have just a domestic machine, you're probably gonna have a little bit of trouble getting this to slide across there. So this is why it's important that either you have a walking foot or you have the Teflon type foot, and this is what this is. It's like a plastic, and it won't stick to this like a regular foot may get stuck. So if you're struggling with that, keep it in mind. Either you'll have to find a different material to be using, or you'll want to get a foot that will work well with this material. Now I'm moving on to the bottom. Now remember I said that we're going to leave a portion of this open. If you're somebody who forgets that kind of thing, you can either like draw a line here with like a big X that helps you stop. I've even seen people take like two clips and put them together so they know that that's their stop. Totally up to you, whatever works for you. I've made enough of these that I don't feel like I need to mark, but you certainly could. You certainly could draw your seam allowance also. I'm going to stop about there. Make sure you backstitch really, really well, because this is where you're going to be birthing. And I'm going to cut my thread here, and then I'm going to move way down to right about there where that pin or that clip is. I say pin, I mean clip. Y'all know what I mean. Backstitch really well again, all the way to the end. Holding that same seam allowance, backstitch. Turn. Sorry again if you're hearing my dog. She's very wound up about something. We have a lab and Yorkie, and the Yorkie runs our house, man. She's the boss. There you have it. I went all the way around, and then I left this portion open on the bottom for birthing that bag. Now we're going to box these corners. Okay, so same as before, we're going to line those two seams up, and then I am going to finger press and lay those seams out nice and flat, just like we did with the other bag. sorry, I say the other bag. What I mean is the other side of the bag. Now I'm going to take a clip. I'm going to clip that, and I kind of clip it at a little bit of an angle just to really hold that. And I'm going to make sure all this is nice and flat. And again, I feel along this seam right here to make sure that I can feel the top seam and that seam are lined up. That's how you know you have a nice square corner. And then we're going to run over to the machine. We're going to sew it at the seam allowance called for, keeping the seams nice and flat. Sorry if you can't see that. Nice and flat here. Back stitch. And then as soon as you get up to that seam, my walking foot kind of helps to hold that down. I'm going to get rid of that clip, double checking that it's all flat and open on the bottom. And we're just going to go right across it and on to the other side here. Back stitch and cut. Okay, so there you have it. Both sides stayed up nice and flat and open. I'm going to trim these threads just, you know, because I'm just that way. This stuff is really hard for me to cut with my pinking shears. I've kind of dulled my shears over the years. So I'm just going to cut this down to about 1/8 of an inch, cutting all the way across, just like that. So just to help reduce some of the bulk. Okay, we're going to box the other side, same way. Open this up like that. Get your seams lined up, just like this. Cut that if it drives you crazy. Okay, pull it. And then I'm going to open that up just like the other side, just like that. Okay. I'm going to pin it. Clipping it at an angle. That holds it all nice and flat there. Okay. I'm making sure that these are nice and boxed. Whoop, sorry, the camera again. I'm sure that drives some of y'all crazy. I'm sorry. Okay. Coming over here to my machine. Again, like I said, if you feel like you need to clip this all down nice and so it's nice and flat, totally do that, okay? I've just been making enough bags that I kind of know when I need to clip and when I don't, but totally take the time to do the clipping if you feel like you need to, okay? All right, so I'm gonna go all the way across here, back stitch. Okay, I'm gonna look at it again, see it's nice and straight. So when I cut this out, I got a little bit wonky. So there's like a little bit of an, it's off a little bit, but when I put all this together, you're never going to see it. So if you do that, don't panic. It is totally something that can be hidden in the very end, especially for the interior piece. Okay. All right. So now I have this ready to go and I'm ready to start kind of pinning everything together and start sewing all of it together. So I'm just going to cut these little leftover threads that are everywhere just because, why not? I'm here. Okay, so my preference for making these bags is to turn this portion right side out. My reason for that is the least amount of times that I have to turn that piece, the better, the outside, because I do have that Decoville light in there. And the more you manipulate that Decoville, the more it's going to kind of wrinkle on you. You can totally fix it with an iron, so long as it doesn't get into your vinyl. But, you know, the less you have to deal with that, the better. So I have this turned right side out. I always just poke the corners out, you know, just because that's what I do. I'm going to grab my other piece here. This is my exterior. This is my interior. Interior is right side out. Exterior is inside out. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slip this in here. Now, this is where you have decisions that you may need to make. If you have made a front and a back piece, so if you've put on like a decal, if you've put on like a concho or some sort of decorative piece that really kind of distinguishes the front from the back, you're going to have to decide which side you want that slip pocket on, and or if you've done the bonus pack and you have a zippered pocket or you have any of the add-ons, you kind of have to decide what's front and what's back. For me, it's not going to matter. I forgot to put a tag on the bag today, so I don't really have to worry about that. If you are concerned about lining everything up properly, You can find your centers here. And I probably should have done that before I sewed everything together. So if you are new to bag making, that's probably something you should do, because then you at least have the centers and each side to line up your interior so that you don't risk getting anything kind of like off center. I don't feel like I need to do that, but you absolutely can if you feel like you need to. And if you want to do that, now would be a great time to do that. You can do that with this, and you can do it with your interior so that everything lines up. Okay, so I've got my interior down in there. Now it's time to start clipping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure, here's my exterior, here's my interior. These are the side seams. I'm going to make sure that these line up, and I open these up when I sew around the outside, because again, it cuts down on bulk. Not such a huge deal when you're talking about waterproof canvas and a cotton fabric, but if you're putting 2 layers of vinyl together, gonna be a lot more, it's gonna be a lot easier to work with so if you open up those seams. So and in the pattern, she does talk about sewing those seams open if you want to. It will show up on the bag, but if you have a lot of bulk, sometimes that's the best way to go about it, especially if you're a beginner. So I clip both of the sides together first, because that kind of just lines me out, right? That kind of lines out what's going to happen here. Sorry if I'm getting you guys out of the screen here. I'm trying not to. All right, I've lined up my seams here. I clip on either side on that seam to keep it nice and flat, and you can run your finger down and kind of open that up a little bit further down too if you feel like you need to. It just kind of helps open up that deco de light. It helps keep that waterproof canvas open. There we go. So I'm going to clip on either side. Now I'm turning my clips so that they're facing inward, and that's because when I don't have my cylinder machine set up, and I want you guys to see how you can do this on like a domestic style machine. So when we go around and we sew this up, we're going to be sewing from the inside, and I'll show you that when we get there, but that's why my clips are pointed towards the inside. So I'm going to clip all around the outside, and I'll meet you back so I can talk you through how we're going to go from here. Okay, so I'm gonna do my best not to bump the camera, but you know, work with me here, work with me. Okay, so where I like to start is on the sides, because I want to back stitch and I just don't want that to be real visible from the front. So needle down, forward, and then back. And I can't stress this enough. Take your time going around this piece. Be sure that your front and your back are staying nice and lined up. Mine's already kind of wiggled around here, so I'm going to move it. And then as you go, you're going to stop and you're going to manipulate that bag around. If you have a cylinder machine, bless you, you are so lucky. If you don't, just take your time. I can't stress this enough. Take your time. Make sure your pieces are lined up as you go around. As you get to your straps, make sure you look at them so they're not like, sideways or kind of at a weird angle. Make sure they're nice and straight, because you're going to notice that when you birth this bag, whether or not your straps are straight, okay? And if you feel like you need to, you can totally backstitch across those. Just gives it a little bit more stability, and then continue on. Okay, so this is a good spot for me to kind of stop and regroup. So I'm going to kind of move my bag down a little bit more. I'm going to get myself straightened out here, remove this next pin, and then slowly move along. I can see that my 2 layers are nice and really evenly lined up here. But if your fabrics start to walk around, and they might, just stop and regroup. Now as you go around, I kind of pull the bag towards this direction and then flatten it out. I'm looking at my edges over here to make sure everything is lined up. I'm looking at this strap. It looks like my strap is a little bit sideways here. I'm going to fix that. I'm gonna pull this pin. And one thing too is if you kind of pull tight on this a little bit, it helps to make sure that everything is staying nice and straight. I'm double checking this strap so it feels nice and straight. I'm gonna run across, and I'm gonna back stitch back across, same foot point I just came across, and then there you have a third time. Okay. Again, I'm pulling the bag towards me and then pushing it out of the way. Double checking that things are still lined up now that I've manipulated things. Okay, we're halfway there, you guys. We're halfway there. You're doing great. Okay, and as I move across this with my walking foot, I'm going to make sure that those seams stay nice and open as I go across them. Slow down. You can stop. You can back up if you need to. Pulling the bag towards me some more, bumping the camera, driving you all crazy. Okay. Getting these out of the way. Okay. We are like over 2/3 of the way there, you guys. You're doing great. Okay, double checking here. Make sure that strap is nice and straight before you start across it. Now you can kind of see like my fabric has walked a little bit. You can really see it here. So I'm going to take the time and kind of pull that material back out so the edges are nice and flush with each other. I'm going driving across, I'm driving across, I'm sewing across, I'm back stitching back across, and then sewing back across again. Continuing on, pulling that bag towards me again, double checking, see how I can, there it is. Okay, making sure that's nice and straight. And we're driving across. Here we go. We're almost to our last strap. All right, so checking again to make sure that that is nice and flush with each other. The strap is nice and straight. I can see it. I can feel it. Okay. Almost there, guys. Checking again, making sure that's nice and even. And across we go. We're almost there. Here we go. We're there. Back stitch, always back stitch. Right to that center. Boom. We did it. You did it. Great job. Okay, I'm going to cut these. I'm going to reposition my camera again, and then we're going to birth the bag. Okay, so we made it all the way around. With our seam allowance, I'm just taking a look at everything to make sure all my stitches are complete, that I didn't miss any stitches. Because I'm a little bit OCD, I'm going to trim these little guys here. These are nice and open, so I don't have to stress about those. This got folded over just a little bit. See how that kind of happened there? That happens sometimes. It's cotton, so I think that's probably why that happened. But, I should have done a little bit better job of keeping track of it. But that happens. It's not the end of the world. Don't panic. If you used vinyl, you may want to cut. Sometimes I see people cut these little corners right here just to reduce bulk when they birth that bag. For the fact that I just have waterproof canvas and cotton, it's not going to make a difference. But if you have 2 layers of vinyl, if you have like a heavy waterproof canvas and you have vinyl for your exterior, you may want to reduce some of that bulk before you turn it out. Otherwise, you're going to have a big bulgy seam. Again, make sure you don't cut any of your stitches. Make sure that you stay away from that, and you just be real careful when you go and start cutting things that you don't cut through anything. Okay. So now remember, on the inside, we have the hole, right? The hole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick my hand in there, and I'm going to try and get this on camera as best as I can, but honestly, it's hard when you're birthing a bag. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach all the way down to the bottom, right? And I'm going to grab these. I'm going to poke these little corners out because that gives me something to grab onto, right? So my hand's in there, I'm grabbing onto that. I'm going to do the same on the other side so that those, just so I have like something leverage to kind of hold onto, right? So I'm grabbing onto both of those corners, and I'm just going to kind of roll this around and pull it right out through the hole. Now you want to be careful especially if you're using the Decaville, to try and not get too many creases in it. Again, you can totally use your iron to get rid of some of those creases, but you know, the less you have to do for sort of, you know, mitigating damage, the better. So I pulled the bag internally. So now here it is right at the bottom and ready to come out of the hole. And I'm just gently gonna start pulling that out through the hole. Sorry guys, again, I'm trying to, let me turn you just a little bit there. Just don't look at my mess over there. Okay. I'm gonna pull this through just like that. Oh, there's a strap. See how easy that kind of works its way around? Just take your time and don't yard on things. If you yard on things, that's when you're going to start popping stitches and you're going to start tearing things. And you definitely don't want to do that. I'm just going to keep folding this around just like this. Okay. Almost there, guys. Almost there. Okay. So I'm sticking my hand back in the hole. I'm going to feed this all the way down here. And I'm just using my fingers, but I'm pushing out these edges. Just like that. See how nice this looks now on the bottom? See how like finished that looks? And see how nice how well these all match up. And over here, how well those matched up. See how nice and professional that looks. Okay, so my Decoville light, I just got a couple of little creases in it. I can totally get rid of those with the iron, so I'm not too worried. I'm just kind of pulling these seams out, making sure everything just kind of feels nice and crisp. This bag is like so cool. I'm loving it. Okay, now up here at the top, I'm just going to start kind of pulling and separating here. Again, I've got one hand inside and one hand outside of this thing. Kind of just pulling. Now, you don't want to reef on it because you don't want to pop those stitches, right? So just be careful of that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my hand out and then I'm going to just kind of wiggle this interior down in there. So right now, you're not going to sew this close because you never know, you may have to still kind of finagle some things. So what we're going to do first is we are going to work on this edge here. And what I do is I just kind of go like this, just wiggle it back and forth. And that pulls that seam right up to the top. And I'm going to clip it. I'm going to go all the way around the bag doing that, right? I'm going to clip all that. See how those stitches come right up to the surface, but they're not too bulgy. They're not sticking out. They're not, looking wonky, for lack of a better term. I go all the way around, just working that seam, just like that. And just kind of finger pressing as I go. You can totally go to your iron in this case because I just have cotton fabric here. If I had vinyl, you wouldn't be able to do that, but because I have cotton fabric, you could totally do that. Now, when I get to this seam, I want to make sure this is nice and straight. Look how nice that turned out. Now I'm going to pin it just like that. And I'm just, like I said, I'm just rolling this through my fingers, going all the way around, pushing those seams out. Okay, I'm going to finish this up and I'm going to speed it up and then I'll meet you back here. Okay, so I have everything pinned and I am ready to go to the sewing machine. Now, when I sew the external and the internal pieces together, I sewed from the inside. Now, doing the top stitching, I just feel like it looks better if I do it from the top. So I'm going to be going around the bag and I'm going to walk you through it all like I did with the other when I put the two together on how I top stitch. And keep everything kind of out of the way, but also keep everything nice and straight. All right, so let's do that. Okay, so here we are back at the machine. So what I like to do is I'm gonna push these out. You can't see me there. I'm gonna push these out of the way for right now. Okay. Now, sorry guys, this is going to be kind of a challenge. So stick with me. Stick with me. I promise that it's going to be okay. It's just going to be a little bit of a, you're going to get a little bit of a whiplash here for a second. Okay. So again, I like to top stitch at about 1/8 of an inch. So I am using my walking foot, so I need to be real diligent to be sure I don't have any pins in the way. Okay. And again, I'm starting here's my seam. That's where I like to start because I'm just going to backstitch and I feel like it doesn't look too unsightly. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm at 1/8 of an inch. I do two forward, 2 back, and then I'm off. Okay. So now here I'm going around. Now what you can't see is underneath, I have everything like tucked out of the way. So see the bag is pushed way back there. You have to be real careful because I have these straps that you have to kind of keep them pulled this way to sew around them, but you don't want to accidentally sew them from underneath as you go around either. So I'm just kind of rolling everything out of the way. I'm going to keep rolling that material for the lining under, make sure everything looks like it's nice and lined up. And then I'm going to go for a few more stitches. I'm double checking that I don't have anything bulking up on me underneath of here. See how I'm getting kind of close there? So like before, I'm going to keep pulling the material nice and straight like I did from the underside when we sewed these two pieces together. I'm making sure that my strap is sticking out nice and straight as I top stitch across it. Nice and slow. And I can see that my fabric is rolling just a smidge. It's not bad, but things are starting to roll out a little bit. So I'm going to roll it back under. I'm still double checking that I don't have anything underneath of here. And I'm going for it. Pulling my pins as I go. And if you're like me, you just like push them out of the way and they get everywhere. Now see, I'm getting a little bit close there and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to roll the bag towards me a little bit more. And I'm going to bump you all around here. Here we go again. Pull my pin, double checking that everything is still nice and lined up. My strap is nice and straight. Okay, so here's my other strap back here. So I want to make sure that that is out of my way so I'm not risking that I'm going to sew over it. Tucking this under again. And here we go again. We're almost halfway there, you guys. Here we are. Here's our side seam. Okay, pulling everything tight, tucking everything down and out of the way. My fabric's rolling a little bit. I'm going to fix that. Okay, here we go. Now, if you're using a vinyl or like a heavy canvas, something heavier than cotton, you may need to be real careful that when you're going over the seam that you don't get that bulk. And if your seam isn't flat, like it should be, you can reach inside of the bag because we still have that open and you can get your hand up in here and you can manipulate this around to get it to lay nice and flat for you so that you don't get the bulk. And as you go over it, if you're real particular about your stitch length, as it gets closer to this hump, sometimes the stitches are going to get shorter. If you want to avoid that, go nice and slow and just make sure that your piece is continuing to move through the feed dogs. Okay, here we come to this next strap. So we're going to pull that out, making sure everything is good here. I'm feeling under here. I know that I'm not getting any of my other side of the bag stuck underneath it there. And here I am moving, sorry guys, wiggling you around again. Okay, we're going to go over here. Now I can feel something under here and I don't know what it is. So I just want to check and make sure. Pulling things towards me again. Now here's this strap. We're going to go across that. and it's nice and straight here, so I don't have to worry. Pulling my pins, I'm checking underneath. Now this is tucked out of the way. Okay. Eating it a little bit more. Again, looking to make sure that that's staying tucked out of the way. We're almost there, you guys. We're down to the last couple of pins here, so. Pins. I keep saying pins. What I really mean is clips. But you all know what I mean. Okay, I'm pulling this nice and tight. I see this is rolling a little bit. I'm gonna fix that. Here we go again. Making sure this is nice and straight. Here we are. We're almost to the end, you guys. I usually clip this just so that it doesn't get kind of tangled up and when I come back across it. Making sure this is all lined up. And here we're gonna meet up. Look at that. The colors are even matching. And boom. There you have it, you guys. And then on this side, what I do is I pull these strings up and I snip them back a little bit, just like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my lighter and I'm going to singe those just like that. And then I just push them down to make sure they're nice and melted. You can just do a little bit at a time so you don't singe your material. There you have it. So you do see that just a little bit, but I don't feel like it's offensive. And you definitely don't really see it from the outside, and that's really what matters. So let's get repositioned. We're going to take a look at this thing. All right, you guys. So we're almost there. We still have to do the internal, but here you have it. Let me turn you a little bit here. There you go. So here's the interior. Here's the exterior. And here's the bottom. Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to turn you down here a little bit. We're going to pull this out. What I do is I always kind of pop those little corners out. And I pop these little corners out. Now, if what you do is you take this and you just kind of pull it tight like this piece, these little things down here are just going to kind of naturally go into place where they should be, right? So you just kind of pull that tight. You're going to finger press this so it's nice and straight. Now, if you want to, you can measure this seam. You can totally do that. In this case, though, I feel pretty confident that I'm going to pin this. It's nice and lined up. I mean, look at that. I mean, you really couldn't do much better than that. Which is, it's kind of nice to sew across these edges a little bit when you're putting this bag together. And that's kind of why you do that, is so that your opening will kind of naturally do what it's supposed to do. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew across here. I'm top stitching, right? I'm top stitching across this and I'm going to top stitch at 1/8 of an inch. And what I do is I pull this tight like this, and I don't go all the way to the end, but I do kind of sew across this whole thing just to kind of keep it looking really consistent when it's tucked down in the bag. It's totally your preference. You don't have to. You can just sew the area that isn't sewn yet, but I just kind of like to run across the whole thing just because it looks kind of nice, I think. Okay, so I've gotten this lined up inside here, and this is my walking foot. I've kind of like pushed it up in there. I'm at 1/8 of an inch. I have my foot down. I'm going to go forward 2 and back 2, and then I'm off. Now I'm holding these pieces so that they're nice and crisp and lined up here and kind of holding them in place. You can use a stylus if you have a stylus. Here, you can use one of these if you want to. I just use my finger, but I also really take my time. And I'm kind of pulling this back to keep it nice and straight and tight. Oops, sorry guys. Let me reposition this bag over here. Okay, here we go. All right. So now you can see right down in there, I'm just pulling this straight and I'm going not all the way, but pretty close. I want to be about even on either side. So back stitch twice, forward twice, cut, boom. We're done. So see, you have the beginning and the end. I'm just going to snip those. And then I'm looking at the back. I'm just going to snip those off. And then I'm going to singe it just to be thorough. I mean, you did backstitch, so you shouldn't need to, but I'm just being thorough. There we go. And then over here, I'm going to singe that one real quick. There you have it. I'm going to pick up these little strings I have everywhere, and we're going to get this thing finished up. All right, so we have closed the bag up and we are done. So I'm going to stick this back in here. And I'm sticking my arms down in there to kind of finagle that waterproof canvas, poking out its little corner so it fits right down into here. Okay, so here's a different bag that I made. This is what I mean by the little rivet. So this is a little magnetic thing here. And I add this like after the bag is done because it has like this decorative little rivet. And here's what I was talking about by a little concho, that you could put a little concho on there just to decorate your bag. And this definitely signifies that this is the front of my bag. So when I made it, I wanted to be sure that I had my slip pocket back here. And this is kind of a fancy way of doing the slip pockets, and I can show you guys how to do that another time. Also, here's the little add-on for your key ring. And then also a different top. So this is actually vinyl on the very top and then waterproof canvas under. And these are all add-ons in the weekend add-on pack for this bag. So that's just another way of making the bag, but this is how I kind of like to do it. So these are the little rivet caps. And then here's my magnetic portion of the bag. But you can also get this style. And what these look like is they have like the little prongs on them. And if you do utilize that style, you need to add your magnetic clasps prior to sewing the two pieces together. There's lots of videos out there on how to do that, so you can look those up. But basically, if you're going to do this style of magnet, you need to put them on your interior of your bag prior to sewing these two together. So because I didn't do that, I'm going to get rid of those. And we're going to do the rivet style. So we're going to do that next. Okay, so one thing that I always do is if I am going to be punching a hole through, I like to clip the two sides of the bag together because I'm going to be punching a hole right through here, through both layers. So what I do is I line up my bag handles here, and I use this style of clip, and I just clip them together. That just keeps them together so that as I'm hammering on them and I'm moving them around, they stayed sort of married together, right? So I make sure that it's even over here. I make sure that my two straps line up, and then I clip them together. So I know that when I find the center of my bag, that these two halves are married together and ready for when I punch through. So what I like to do is, these are pretty good sized magnets, right? So this is how far they're going. This is how much space they're going to take. So you want to make sure that when you punch your hole, you're at least a ½ inch into the bag, right? Because otherwise this could potentially hang up, be really visible. So I like to go in at least a ½ inch. So I just say like a heavy ½ inch, right? So I line my ½ inch mark, and I just make sure that the line is inside here. And then I know that if I punch the hole right there, this is where my magnet is going to sit. So there's plenty of room between that and my seam allowance, and you're not going to see that from the exterior of the bag. So I like to go in a 1/2 inch. Now what I do is I measure halfway between here and here, between my 2 straps, halfway between here and here, right? And then I'm gonna go down a 1/2 inch. So actually what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move my clips over to this side of the strap, keeping those lined up the way they are now, just like that. There we go. Okay, so I moved that around, so I'm gonna finagle that back into position. There we go. There we go. Okay, now we're good. I'm gonna make sure this is lined up here so that they're even. And then I'm gonna measure between here and here. I'm gonna find my center point, and I'm gonna put a little chalk mark there. Okay, so I measured halfway between here and here. And you know, if you accidentally got your bag strap just a little bit off or something, it's always good, you know, to tell you it's this measurement always. That's not always the case. I always measure the distance between here and here with every single bag, and I find my halfway point, because it could be 1/8 of an inch difference. It could be you know, upwards of 1/4 of an inch difference. If you have different width strap, that's going to change things. So just always make it a habit to measure between this strap and this strap to find your center. So that's what I did, and it's right here. And it's hard to see because I use this blue marker, but here it is right there. And I measured in, I have this 1/2 inch ruler, so I went in a 1/2 inch, and I just put that mark on that side of the ruler when I found my halfway point. All right. So I have these pinned together, so I know that they're even on either side, and I'm just making sure that it's lined up here and here, right? So I'm going to come back with my little mat here. I'm going to put it underneath, still holding to make sure that this stays even. I'm grabbing my little punch that I used before, and this is just a little hole. See how small that is? It is not a big hole. You really don't need a big hole when you're talking about this. This thing is not much bigger than just a standard like rivet, right? So just look at what size you have and make sure that your punch is even like on the smaller side, because if it's oversized, you're just gonna have a lot of slop, and you don't want that. So I'm making sure all this is lined up again. I know I keep saying that, but it's important. Ask me how I know. I totally screwed up a bag once doing that. Okay, so again, I'm getting this straight up and down, holding on to it. Got my trusty mallet here, and whack. And that went through all of the layers. Well, I'm gonna give it one more just to be sure. Whack, okay? Again, I roll this around to be sure that it's cut through everything, and then I pull it out, okay? Now here you have it. Here's your little hole. It's kind of hard to see, but there is a hole, and it's all the way through. So now that I've done that, I can unclip this because I don't need those anymore. Get rid of my punch, and I'm grabbing my other little tools over here. Sorry, I didn't have those ready. Okay, so this is a lifesaver. If you don't have these, I highly recommend getting them. A lot of times you can get them like with these little magnetic rivets, and so I don't know exactly where I got those from, but I believe I got them on Amazon. If I can figure it out, I will link them. But you see, one has a divot inward. See that? And one has the divot outward, so that you can put your two. So here's the inward, and it goes on this one, and it sits nice and flush, so it doesn't accidentally excuse me, I have the hiccups. It doesn't accidentally bend that magnet when you're beating on it, right? So the next thing you have to decide is which side is your front and your back, and which side do you want your male and your female. So in my case, I usually put the female on the front. In this case, this is my front. So, sorry, the male. I put the male on the front. So there it is. And then I'm going to put my little cap on it, just like that. See how pretty that is? And now what I'm going to do is I'm taking the little piece that has the little inward divot, because this is the male side. I'm marrying those together. See how nice and flat that sits? I'm setting this down. I'm setting this down at a nice flat angle. This rivet is going to sit nice and flat. I have this nice big concave strike. I'm not sure what this is actually called. I'll have to look it up. But I make sure that it's nice and straight, 90 degree up and down. I've got my mallet, and I'm not just going to get crazy and start whacking it from all over. I get it nice and square. I'm holding it nice and square. Whack, whack, whack. Okay, start with 3. Don't get too carried away. So I still have a little bit of a give there, so I want to go a little bit more. So I'm lining this up again. I'm holding it. I'm holding it flat on here. I have it on a nice flat work surface. And I'm going to hit it again. 1, making sure it's straight again. 2, 3. Okay. I'm going to stop there because I can see that I've got it nice and tight now. Okay. All right. So that's nice and tight. And now I'm going to do the other side. Okay. So now I have my female end. This would be what I call the back of my bag. I poke it through, putting my rivet cap on it. Just like that, it snaps into place. Now this is the other side, so it's got a little male side, so it's got the little knob there, and then here's a little insert, and then look at that, they've married together perfectly. I'm going to push the back of the bag out of the way, but making sure that this stays straight up and down. You don't want it at an angle, otherwise things are going to start looking wonky. Okay, now I have this on a nice hard flat surface, and I've got this at a nice 90-degree angle. I'm going to hold this here. I'm holding both sides. Whack, whack, whack. Okay, 3 times. Stop at 3. Now you're going to feel how tight that is or is not. It looks like it needs a little bit more. I'm lining this back up. Lining everything back up again. Again, straight up and down. And now I can feel it just got solid. So when I hit it, I could feel like there was no more give there, which tells me that that's nice and tight. Okay, so now let's scooch you out a little bit here. Okay, so there you have it. We have our female and our male end. Boom, magnets. They look nice. They have a nice little finish silver rivet. And that's it, you guys. Those are nice and centered, and this bag is ready to give away, to utilize, to sell, whatever you want to do. But look how fun that is, you guys. Look at those flowers. My grandma, my mom, my aunt, they would all love this bag. So, all right. Thanks for hanging out with me. This is my very first YouTube video, and I am so excited you guys have hung out. If you're still here and gotten through all of the challenges of this bag and logistics and knocking the phone around and all of that through this, I super appreciate you guys. If you haven't, consider subscribing to my channel. That's what lets me know that you guys are liking what I'm doing, so I keep going. Thanks again for being here. I'm going to try and link everything that I have purchased in the description of this video, where I got everything from, some of my favorite tools, what I sew on, all of that. I'm going to try and list that in my video. But if you have any questions, let me know. I'm pretty much an open book. So thanks for being here with me, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.